Welcome back to another SuperCoach video with me, JD. Now, as I mentioned in the last video, it was a little bit scuffed due to the recording situation and setup. So I thought I'd quickly check in again, just given how important it is to get our trades right this week to set ourselves up for the rest of the year and go through my rankings at each position. These inevitably are the questions that I get asked the most. Who should I trade out, this player or this player, for this player or this player? So I've got rookies, mid-prices, premiums, who I think are the ins and the outs from each of those lines that you can go down and check who have I got, who haven't I got. And as soon as you reach someone that you haven't got, now you can start weighing them up against your options, your other options on the other lines, and figuring out which ones you need for your structure in your team. And obviously, it's all team dependent. So these rookie rankings or any of the rankings should only be taken in the context of your team, but hopefully they'll be a useful decision aid for making those decisions and at least have an idea about how I have them rated at the moment. Anyway, now many of these are quite fine, but you know, people are going to ask for this one or this one, so I've tried to do that the best I can. And I will mention as well that if a player is not on this list, it's probably not because I've forgotten them, it's just that I don't think they're a priority in or out. Maybe in some niche cases they are someone that you would bring in or out, or maybe they are just a hold. And if you really want to press on those, we can talk about them. But if they're not in these lists, they're probably not top of mind for me. And I just don't think there's many situations where they would actually be a real consideration. So in terms of reading what's on the page, you've obviously got the rank, the player's name, their current price, their break even, what their ownership percentage is across the entire competition at the moment, which isn't my favorite metric, but I know people look to it and it's at least a little bit useful now that the year started to begin, as well as then whether ownership's gone up or down. And to be honest, I probably should have done this for like top 5 or 10% of coaches, but even that changed a lot in the first few weeks. Anyway, so for example, you can see that Ashcroft is 80% owned, and that is 2% up from the start of the week. So it was actually 78% beforehand. And that will come into play when we see some of the options, especially the mid prices that were unique and now they're increasingly not unique. All right, so let's just going rookies top to bottom. So Sheasel has been the must-have since round 1, effectively, and that hasn't changed. If you don't have him, like I get him in your side, I'm going to go through the top 5, combining all these ranking lists, and spoiler alert, he's going to feature. All right, then Ashcroft bounced back really nicely last week, and showed basically the potential that he's going to live up to. He is safe in terms of his job security. He's going to be playing as an on-ball midfielder with the Lions, and yeah, going to be one that's fun to own. Ginby is the pick of the defenders. I have slightly ahead of McKenna, although ideally I think you'd have both, and maybe McKenna ends up being better. Ginby does have the DPP, which is nice added flexibility, and of course he has been quite required in a pretty underpowered West Coast midfield. Maybe this changes with Yo coming back and he ends up playing behind the ball a little bit more and he drops down, and maybe McKenna does end up being higher. But either way, he's someone that you want in your sides, and if you don't have him, jump on. McKenna is the first of these, which does have its ownership dropped a little bit to just the 55%. And he is someone that I think you absolutely should have. Very important for your defensive structure, scoring well, mature age. They like him back down there. Coleman's only just coming back from injury, but now Rich is out with another injury, so he should continue to score well this week and be heavily used as an exit out of defense. And he's been very impressive in both games so far, and he's got praise from Fagan. So yeah, love McKenna. Next up is McKenzie, and maybe this might be a little bit contentious having him over Chandler, especially given his elevated 180k price tag. But while his break-even is lower and he did have a poorer week where they dropped his CBAs, which is concerning, his job security should be pretty safe and pretty good. And there are some slight concerns over Chandler's job security, despite his scoring power and the fact that he's a mature age rookie. Now, the interesting thing with Chandler is he's up to 21.5% ownership. That's up 12.4%. So prior to this week, he was sub 10%, which I was one of those owners, which is pretty nice. But yes, increasingly less. He's going to be less like unique, which is fine. That's inevitably happens with rookies. People jump on the ones they miss. But yeah, he's one that I would definitely look to. And to be honest, most people, at least like I imagine most that listen to me, most serious super coaches have 1 to 5. Maybe there's a few without McKenna. So Chandler is probably the top of your list if you're looking for a rookie in option this week. And then just kind of for completeness, Constable, some concerns for me, at least anyway, over what his job security looks like in the medium term, but his scoring has been pretty hard to deny over the first couple of weeks and is a great option in your defense. And then Hollins is one that I'll shout out again, who, just because of the number of people ahead of him, isn't getting much love. You know, there was a strong set of people that swapped from Phillips to Hollins pre-round one, including myself. And his ownership hasn't really gone up just because the price is awkward and there's other people to jump on. But I think he's going to be a very solid rookie. I think his job security has improved with the way he's played over the first couple of games. And I'm pretty impressed with his scoring potential. And then Carlton's fixture over the next 5-6 games is very nice. We'll talk about it with some of the other people that feature in this list later. But yeah, I think that should help your scoring as well. So I think it's a very solid option. If for whatever reason you have the first 7 and you're looking for a rookie, then Hollins is probably the go. Honourable mention would be Caminiti, who at the 102k price point has shown that he could score well so far, and I think I'd have him over Philippou at the moment. All right, on the outs, so there's lots of people I could point to that are really bad, but in terms of the outs, I'm going to try and keep all of the outs to players that are at least like somewhat popularly owned. So we're looking at roughly 10% or more. I make some exceptions, but you know I don't want to be talking about mid prices that are 1 or 2% owned, and you know that means like Ash and Wangan Malira won't get talked about, but they're obvious trade outs, I would imagine. So yeah, all right. So in terms of rookies, then McLean, he got dropped by the Dogs, didn't score particularly well through the first 2 games anyway, so he's an easy one to bounce, especially given that he's got money in him that you could free up. Next would be Campbell Chesser. I'll be very interested to see if he actually gets named tomorrow, given that he was subbed out. His break-even is now 23, and he may fail to reach that this week. So he is someone that you can jump off. I am personally jumping off. I'll show you my trades at the end, but he is making way for others. McVee, I've got in here. Not as highly owned as the others, but some definitely jumped on him. Salem's injury should give him slightly more job security, but honestly, he's been playing so bad and scoring so bad that I'm not sure it actually does. He's someone that you can pretty safely move on from. Next, I've got Green, who at this point in the list, like I don't think these are like priority out. It's just if you need to trade someone out, then I guess this is who you'd put in on the list. I'm very happy to own and keep Fergus Green myself as a F8. But if you didn't have any of the other 3 and you needed to move on a rookie, then yeah, that's probably where I'd be looking. He should continue to be a slow burn. I think his job security is good. He had an okay score despite kicking like four behinds. If he actually starts slotting some of these goals, he's going to end up popping some 70s, maybe even some 80s, and get that cash gen going pretty good. So yeah, not someone that you need to fret on, but like if you're desperate for an option. And then lastly, I just put on Goda. I was kind of surprised that his ownership was as high as it was. The role just hasn't been as good as what we were hoping it would be in the preseason, especially with emergence of Sheasel as a half back. So yeah, like just given the high price tag, I think someone you may be able to move on from. But once again, like people that have picked up Goda, it's probably for structural reasons in defense, and that makes me hesitant to move on from him. Mid price is the one that everyone cares about. I've tried to keep these lists pretty narrow as well because realistically, you probably shouldn't have too many more than what's on the list. All right, but let's get into it. Firstly, like Zeeble versus Setterfield, I think these are pretty close, and there definitely seems to be a preference towards Setterfield at the moment, with him going up to 23.8% ownership. That's up 19.1%. So he was 4.7% owned or something like that, and it's shot up massively. So sub 5%, and then similarly Zeeble was sub 4%. Nope, sub 5% as well, and he's gone up like 9.3%. So they've both gone up. Personally, I lean a little bit more towards Zeeble for 2 reasons. 1, he's more likely to be a keeper than Setterfield, and then 2, his DPP when it opens in round 6 will be very handy, especially with Sheasel. So that's why I'd pick him. The value of him becoming a keeper is much more than a few extra points and a little bit extra cash, just because you save a trade, which is very, very valuable. So that's why I'd have Zeeble ahead of Setterfield, but I do think Setterfield probably makes more money and scores better than Zeeble. But it's not just about that. It's about whether or not you have to use another trade at the end, and that's what puts Zeeble ahead, even though I think it's still less likely than more likely that he finishes the year in our teams, just because of his age and, where North's at in the list. I think there's enough risk that he probably doesn't end up being a keeper, but there is still some chance, and that's why he ends up ahead. Setterfield, obviously, I've come around to. I was looking at him pre-round 1 and just didn't end up doing it, which is quite frustrating now, but it has given me the confidence to jump in on him. After week 1, I was a little bit worried that his scoring was a bit fraudulent just because it was only 3 contested possessions and all the scoring came when we were really beating up on North. But last week he was good, basically start to finish, playing on Miller and Rao. Just both at the contest and around the ground. Kicked a nice goal too, which he's not going to do every week. But yeah, I mean, I think Setterfield has shown that he can probably average 100 to 105. So definitely make the 150k benchmark that we'd be looking for, plus give you good points on field as well. So I think he's a bit of a no-breaker. That negative 49 break even, if we look at, compared to some of the rookies, it sits in here as well. So it's pretty wild that his break even's that low. Next, I've got Warple, who's a little bit cheaper than these two, and the scoring looks like it may be a touch below. Some concern with what they're doing with CBAs in that midfield and the mix of those, but I think he is still a very good option. Looks to be able to go 90 plus at that 300k price point, which is great. And funnily enough, he's going to be more unique than Setterfield after this week, just based on the ownership changes. Next up, I've got Cameron, who is probably the option that you're looking for if you're going for a forward or ruck. Maybe controversially, I've got him above Goulden, which I'll explain in a second. So once again, another low break even, something you can ride up on cash. He's going up 11.5%, which is more than Zeeble and more than Warple, which is a bit surprising to me. Maybe it makes sense with some of the injuries, but yeah, up to 30%. Kind of wild that it's that much. But yeah, definitely has looked the goods. I think the concern in the preseason was about the ruck split and whether he could score well with it. Hasn't seemed to be a problem for him so far. And they used him basically 90% as ruck went on field. And then lastly, Goulden. So the reason why I've got him below Cameron isn't because I don't think he's a good option. It's just that Cameron does have DPP. So if you're picking up Cameron as a forward even, and you can use it for a ruck cover, that is kind of appealing. Like, even though I have Goulden probably scoring similar or maybe slightly outscoring Cameron from here on out. But yeah, I think they're both good options if you don't have them. To be honest, I'd be fine with you going either. Maybe personally, I'd still go Goulden over Cameron. I don't know. The DPP is really nice for the rucks. And then outs, I don't think these are too... I think most of these are pretty obvious. So like Bruno and Flanders just have to go. We've talked about better options like Zeeble and Sheasel. So yep, they're pretty easy to get rid of. Draper, I was surprised, is 11.6% owned, so I included him just because it's that double-digit figures. But yeah, that is someone that I'd be moving to a Cameron, given it's only a 50, 60k increase really in price. Has played all right this year, but it just doesn't translate to Supercoach scoring. Finn Callahan is someone that I still have personally as someone I'd be probably looking to trade out in the right situation. Just given the knock to his shoulder, the fact that Kelly should be coming back and that should be affecting his roll back to more that wing position, just don't really fancy him as a great option. Now, with that said, his break even is -8 this week. So you, of course, can do stuff like potentially loop him with Hopper if you've got Hopper in your team and wait a week, get some price rise, and then move him around if you really have to. But I think he is someone that can go, and it is someone I get asked about. So yeah, if Callahan's what you have to get rid of to get Setterfield or Zeeble, go for it. And then lastly, Horn Francis. Yeah, a lot of people jumped on him maybe a touch too early last week. I think he was the most traded in player, and it's someone that I'd probably be looking to trade back out. It's not the highest priority because I think he could come fine, and he does have a low break even, and I think he's got a nice matchup with the Crows this week. So yeah, maybe it's someone that you could deal with slightly later, but I don't mind people that want to move on from Horn Francis. You'll note Hopper's not on the list. I have that pegged as a 1-week injury, and that's a hold for me. I don't think he's someone that you could trade in, obviously, on injury either. And then as I kind of touched on, some of these other mid-prices like Ash and Wanganeen Maliri, you can just jump off. All right, lastly, premiums. So this is kind of I've classified it loosely as 500k plus price point here, which you can kind of look at from the prices. There's only 4 that I think are really worth targeting this week if you don't have them. That's Dacos, LDU, Green, and English. We'll start with Dacos, the little pig himself. He has shot up massively. I want to say at week 1, he was maybe 33%, 34% ownership, something like that. But gone up 14% again this week, so he's up nearly 60%. LDU is probably the pick of the midfield over Green at the moment, especially given he's a little bit unique as well, lower break even. but I don't mind still wanting to go to green. Both of these are great options. I'd love to have both in my midfield. And then finally, English, who's someone I'm eyeing off, I think is the pick of the premium rucks if you're not going the Cameron option. The trade outs. The top two are pretty obvious here. Gone and Steele. They're both injured. They are people that you can safely trade out. Next up, I've got underperformers, which I've complained about both in my own videos and on the Fantasy Take TV podcast, but Macrae and Darcy. Macrae is going to be negatively affected by Bevo pretty badly, so that's someone I think you can jump off. He might even have a good week this week, but the week-to-week unpredictability of what they do with that midfield is enough to jump off for me. I'm really worried with what I've seen 2 games in. Darcy, Freo's not working at the moment. Their mix isn't working, and that means change is going to happen. We already saw Longmire starting to fiddle with like Jackson forward, Jackson and the right, Darcy forward, which didn't work. It didn't work for the game, didn't work for scoring. So there's a chance they revert all this stuff back. But honestly, I'm happy to jump off. We were trying to find someone that had the upside of English. English has got the upside of English. So yes, while English does have the soft tissue kind of concerns over the preseason, at least he's got the scoring on the board, and I'd rather take that type of risk. I'd rather have someone that's good at scoring with a little bit of injury risk than someone that's bad at scoring that still has injury risk. So yeah, jumping off. Neil hasn't been particularly bad in himself, which is why he's below like Darcy and Macrae. It's just Dunkley and others, and like Dunkley and Ashcroft from the side is definitely affecting his ability to score, at least in my mind. His break even's 188, so if you want to jump off him to free up cash, I get it. And then Ridley and Doherty are probably other two that are in similar boat in the sense that I don't think they've been necessarily that bad, but they've got higher break evens just given how their last games played out. I'm personally happy holding on to Ridley, given that he's got Saints and GWS in the next 2 who've given up large scores to intercept defenders in the opening weeks. And then Doherty, much like Hollands, has that really soft fixture over the next 5-6 weeks, and I want to own him through that for sure. So, look, these 2 are kind of on the list because they get asked about a lot. And if they are your only way of getting to Nick Dacos, I understand why you would want to make that trade. And then that's, I think, a judgment call up to you. But I don't think they're must trades by any means. All right, so to wrap it all up, here is the top 5 ins and outs for the week across the 3 things that I've talked about. Here's probably my personal rankings. So on the ins, I think Sheasel is the number 1 must-have, which most people do, which is good. Followed up by Dacos, Zeeble, Setterfield, and Ashcroft. They'll be the top 5. Make sure you have those in your team this week if you can. And then on the outs, I'd be getting rid of Gorn and Steele. They're injured. Bruno and Flanders, who have massively underperformed as mid-prices and really don't have an optimistic outlook based on what we've seen. And then McLean, who's dropped, very similar to the injury stuff. That is the video in terms of the ins and outs. Let's quickly jump to then my team. So I can show you how I've applied it myself. So as I kind of mentioned, I have some of these players already. I've already done the trades in this one. Hold on, let's reverse it, sorry. So I've got a lot of these priority ins. You know, the rookies I have down to Hollands. I think I had all of them on that list, which is really nice coming into that week because I'd already got Chandler. I started with Holland, so this is good. So I can move on to that. I had Dacos, but you can see in the midfield I'm missing Setterfield, and in the forward line I'm missing Zeeble. So these become priorities for me. And then I've got some underperformers here in Darcy and Macrae, and I'm like even Ridley and Doherty, but really Darcy and Macrae are the ones I want to jump off. And Chesser, probably from the rookie perspective. And so that's what I've been playing around with. So let's see if we get rid of Macrae for Setterfield. And then that frees up the money to get rid of Chesser for Zeeble. And then finally, I can get rid of Darcy. And given that I've got the cash, it probably makes sense to me just to get English and hold on to the money. Although it would be interesting to see if I went Cameron, how much does that leave me for next week? 215k. Maybe that's something. Oh, sorry, you can't see behind my head, but it's 215,000 rather than 100,000. So an extra 115k. Whether that lets me do something worthwhile next week that would make me want to hold on to that, I don't think they would. I mean, like I could trade Ridley to Laird or something if I somehow found a way to get some DPP going, but I don't think I'm really interested in that. I'd rather just have the premium here in English. So those would be the trades. Hit confirm. And then that's the team ready to go for the week. So yeah, that is my kind of trade advice. This will change. The rankings will of course change when teams come out. And you know, things adjust, people get dropped, blah 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 blah. But as of Wednesday the 29th, that is how I'm thinking about the week ahead and the priority of the picks. Please use common sense to adjust, and if you do have any follow-up questions, hit me up below. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next one. Peace.